Your hair, knee hair.
You're a bit too close to me.
Bro, I'm stuck.
Yes, guys, welcome back to another episode of the BrokeCast, episode 6. And today we're talking about a bit of everything. We're covering the latest price action. We're talking about some news. And we're also going to be talking about CBDCs. And then we're also obviously going to be speaking about XRP a little bit as well, because it kind of does relate to CBDCs. But yeah, a bit of everything today, a bit of an update. And we'll start off with price action. Kind of chopped sideways, Bitcoin has. It's found a little bit of a range between 35.5 and like 32k. It's just chopping it in between the middle of that right now. Yeah, XRP is popping again today. Last time we recorded this podcast, it popped up, and this week it's popped up literally. It was the same day.
Yeah, literally. Oh, maybe we did it on Monday last week.
Maybe we need to record a podcast every day, then XRP will hit 135 sooner rather than later. Maybe. But yeah, next, what do you think is going to happen next? Obviously, there's liquidation sitting at around 35,500. If you follow Will on Twitter and myself, you'll see that we've both been tweeting about this, how we think we're going to see a potential move towards 35,500. But there's a lot of liquidation sitting up there. So this is what we were kind of talking about off camera before, is that if we do start liquidating those shorts up there, then we might even have a little short squeeze towards, well, who knows actually where that will take us after. I guess we would have to update.
I'm looking for 40k, to be honest. Well, I've been saying that for a little while.
There's a lot up there.
Yeah.
So like, it could easily, people start FOMOing in, because 40k, if you look at the charts on your like larger time frames, you can see that there's a lot of significant like support and resistance at 38, 40k.
Yeah, it's a whole number, so people are going to be using that as a reference point. So realistically, we could be like looking at 41, 42 if we do get up there. Anywhere between like 38 and 42 is where I'm looking for like the next real pop out to take us.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to come like faster than people think.
How do you think alts will perform if, say, Bitcoin does start liquidating these shorts at 35.5?
Yeah.
What are these altcoins going to do? Do you think they're going to come up with it, or do you think they'll just stay fairly stagnant in relation to Bitcoin? Obviously, they will experience some sort of pump. You'd expect some sort of pump with whilst Bitcoin makes that move, but do you think Bitcoin dominance will just overexert itself?
Maybe, but I think in the last like 2 weeks, we've seen a huge uptick in like the total market cap for crypto in general. That means fresh money is coming in. So if Bitcoin does head up, alts might just chop sideways and fresh money might come in to buy Bitcoin. That's what I've been saying. Like, it's at the minute, the retailer front-running institutions are almost the plebs, and retailers sitting there pretty. And I've been saying this, and I wrote about it as well, that I thought Bitcoin was going to run up to whatever price we find heavy resistance at. I don't really think it's going to be 40k. I think it's going to be higher than that, maybe like 48 to 55, or maybe even higher, maybe like all-time highs where we find some big resistance. At that level, that's when you get like the degens who rotate some of their Bitcoin profits they've been holding or buying since like the low 20s or 15,500 if they got lucky and got in right at the bottom, or just below 20k. They start rotating those percentage profits over into alts, because we all know liquidity flows around cryptocurrency, and you get much more like huge percentage gains in other things. Just for example, like XRP that we talked about. Yeah. Yes, Bitcoin's popping now. It's up like what 30% in the last 2 weeks is what we had written down. But when XRP moves, like when the SEC lawsuit came out and said that XRP wasn't a security, XRP did 100% in a day. So that's a large cap crypto. We've seen things like Mina Protocol last week. I don't like that project at all, really, but it went up like 100% in a day. Yeah. And we saw Pepe go up 50 or 60% in 2 days. So when people cycle that liquidity out of Bitcoin, they can get much bigger gains in other things.
And this is starting to feel like very similar to what was happening, like we spoke about last week, when we first experienced that pump in back end of like 2020, 2021 kind of period. We saw these like 100% days on some certain altcoins come through. Obviously, Doge was the main meme coin back then. That kind of led the way. Now you can kind of say Pepe is the new Dogecoin in that respect, can't you? Because
Shiba Inu as well did the same, like did huge gains, like in that same respect as well.
Exactly. All these meme coins started popping. A lot of altcoins started pop. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of these altcoins started to pop. You could kind of say these are front runners, and it's starting to feel very similar today. What's happening right now to what was happening back then, and we've also still got the news of the potential ETF hanging over us. Obviously, we've not seen that come out this week. hype's kind of died off with that. People aren't really speaking about the ETF, but it can come any second now. Obviously, Will was saying off camera that he thinks it could even still be on the cards later on this week. It is any day now at the moment.
It's any day now. I think, obviously, we've got FOMC tomorrow. We talked about this. This recording will be out just after FOMC, probably around the same sort of time, actually.
Yeah, probably around the same time.
Maybe just before FOMC comes out, actually, I think. Because FOMC is not first thing in the morning in the US, it's later on. So this recording will come out this recording comes out at 9 p.m. tomorrow, yeah?
9 p.m. our time, yeah.
So then FOMC is probably in the middle of the night for us.
Yeah.
So this will be out just before.
Slightly before.
Yeah, just before FOMC. But whatever happens there, I actually think that the Fed are going to have to loosen because of what I've written about again in the newsletter and also on Twitter. Like, banks are looking bad, and Bitcoin's rallying into that weakness of banks because, as Larry Fink would say, Bitcoin is a flight to quality. Like, who would have thought that he'd be saying that? So that's a ridiculous but also amazing comment from Larry Fink. So in that respect, if we do have some bad news from FOMC, like I said to you, what sort of news couldn't be covered up with the Bitcoin ETF?
Yeah.
Where everyone's like looking at FOMC like, oh my God, what are they doing like here? This is so wrong, boom, 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 the Fed have lost control. Bitcoin ETFs approved at exactly the same time. All the traders are like, oh, Bitcoin.
And then we've also got job reports, I think, day after FOMC, and we've got earnings coming out, I think, from Apple this week. So there's a lot going on, a lot of potential catalysts going on this week as well, but a lot of potential catalysts which could potentially expose more weaknesses in your like normal traditional financial stock markets, etc. as well. And what's going on with stocks right now, actually? I'm not really
Stocks have been down the last until 2 days ago, they were down like heavily each day.
Yeah.
And then like in the last day or two, they've actually, like yesterday rallied like 1.5%, the S&P rallied. But I wouldn't like to make a call on stocks right now.
Yeah, stocks are a bit shaky.
I've got a bit of a theory actually right now that
Go on
people in Congress and like senators are like trying to push this bill forward for like not trading of stocks, like that Congress people, whatever, can't hold stocks.
Yeah.
Why does that come at the same time we also get a White House order about respecting privacy of people in crypto? Maybe they're going to like get pushed out of the TradFi market into the crypto market. They're going to be like, oh yeah, let's keep crypto private. Let's get rid of us holding traditional stocks and we'll all buy crypto.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to be fair. Literally, like I said last week, there's obviously not a world where these big boys, or even now we can translate that into your politicians and all your Congress people, like, don't think that they're not going to line their pockets before they anticipate a big move in crypto. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in, and it's always going to be the world we live in.
And it's perfect timing with the Bitcoin ETF.
Yeah,
it's
literally.
Perfect timing.
Literally, it's horrible to think about, but obviously we're crypto holders, so I don't really care either way. But as long as you can potentially profit off what's actually going on in that wider picture, is what it is.
And the next point we're going to talk about, it's not just in the US, is it?
Yeah, UK.
The UK.
Big news come out from the UK today saying that they're going to regulate the cryptocurrency industry in 2024, on the start of 2024. Now, we knew this was happening, kind of thing. We've seen weird things coming out of the UK with like their relationship with Binance and how they clearly came out and said everything's going to change in 2024. Why 2024? Why have they not just done it last month? Why have they not done it right now?
Yes, exactly. It's not just that, and it's one thing I actually have a qualm with about the UK. And like I told you this, and I wrote about it, but then I deleted the tweet because I don't want to have like heat on me from UK regulators. But basically, the UK have blocked people from buying crypto this year. Crypto's now up like 100% from the bottom. Yeah. So who are they blocking? Like who are they protecting with that block? Because it ain't me.
Exactly.
It's not the average Joe on the street who wanted to buy Bitcoin at 20k.
Yeah.
Oh, because it might be a scam or whatever.
Yeah.
Then they restrict you to £1,000 a day and no more than £3,000 a month. That's what all the banks have done. And then all of a sudden we're up 100%. And then now next year it's going to be regulated. Where we're going to be then? If I'm right with my calls, we could be at all-time highs. Oh, let the retail come back in and buy at all-time highs.
What do you think they've got some sort of motive behind that, or do you think it's just plain stupidity?
I don't know, because the year before, Rishi Sunak and John Glenn, when Rishi Sunak actually wasn't the Prime Minister, he came out and I broke down a huge conference that they did about wanting the UK to be a crypto hub. Now they're reiterating that, how they want the UK to be a crypto hub. And all of a sudden, but at that time, no one can then invest into crypto. PayPal even shut their doors to crypto in the UK just for 3 months, from like October until January. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's gonna change again in January. So I don't know. Like, I don't want to I don't want to speculate, but it seems pretty blatant to me. Like, why are you blocking people when we're at the bottom, and then you're going to let them back in when we're going toward the top, potentially?
I don't know, it baffles me a little bit, but
it frustrates me, man.
Yeah, it's like everyone knows kind of, if people have blocked it until January, it's that they already knew that this was going to happen. A lot of people already seem to know that this was going to happen as well. Obviously, I think Binance, they've come out, because obviously I still get emails from Binance as well. They're working on getting a new like payment merchant relationship sorted up for 2024 in the UK. So it's just like, why is everyone waiting for 2024 in the UK? It's like they've been told that something's going to happen. But why couldn't the general public of the UK benefit from the gains that we've seen in crypto over the past year?
It's so contradictory. It's so contradictory. You've got Rishi Sunak sitting in Parliament saying that he wants the UK to be a crypto hub of the world. And like, in terms of retail in the crypto space, I'm not like at the top level, but I'm quite high up, and he's forced me to move overseas.
Yeah.
So how does that make sense?
I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. I mean, I'm sure we'll have the answers in 2024 anyway, but...
It does make me angry though. Just where you brought up and then they just like kick you out of your own country, but then say that they want the exact job that you do to be like really important in the country that you're from.
Before Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, we were pro-Rishi, for him to get the Prime Minister job, because we thought he's quite forward-looking when it comes to like just finance in general, not just crypto. But obviously we knew he was fairly bullish when it came to crypto as well. Obviously he had meetings with like Brad Garden House, all that kind of things as well. So we were really like pro Rishi Sunak. But this year, as soon as he got the job, it was just like, it shifted a bit, which kind of made me think, what's going on? Do they have a bigger plan? And that's always been my kind of general thesis. Even with the USA, even still to this day, obviously the SEC are still doing their thing with cryptocurrency, but there's not a world that in my head that we live in where the US aren't going to try and position themselves correctly when it comes to cryptocurrency, so they can benefit from it. There's just not a world that they would let that happen. They're not that stupid. Obviously, they have some sort of plan. The UK are starting to show maybe early signs of this plan by bringing in some regulation now at the start of 2024, but...
Yeah, well, it's like Raoul Powell talks about a lot, like the US obviously have the dollar, but then the UK created the euro dollar market, which was a bigger market even than what the dollar was, because the US over-regulated, and then the UK jumped in. So I think that's kind of like what the UK are trying to do now. And like I speculated on Twitter and I've said to you, is we've seen Abu Dhabi coming out with a rumoured exchange called M2, which is supposedly like the exchange of the Middle East, basically, isn't it? So as far as we know, or at least of the UAE. And I've said, well, maybe the UK are going to do the same thing. That's why they've cut all the on-ramps and off-ramps so heavily. Because the only real way that I've always said you can really regulate crypto is by taxing the on and off-ramps. Yeah. Anyone can hide wallets. That was pretty much the idea of crypto in the first place, unless we get some big AI and maybe quantum computing and all these sort of things, which could come tomorrow, I don't know. But until we get that, and until you get a complete hold on what everyone does, which is where you take away everyone's privacy, the main and only real way you can tax is on and off ramps, or regulate is on and off ramps, in my opinion.
That makes quite a lot of sense, to be fair. Like, if you think each region was to have their own kind of massive centralized exchange, like I know it kind of go against the point of cryptocurrency being decentralized, I get that, but like obviously we've seen M2 in the UAE. Say if the UK come out with their equivalent, and like the US create one, or they make Coinbase theirs, or whatever they decide to do, and they can somehow monetize it, I feel like that's the only way we will see proper mainstream adoption.
Well, think about it realistically.
Make money from it.
Like whether it's going to be this year or not, I think something like that's got to happen. Yeah. Because if in this cycle we go to $7 to $10 trillion, like I think we will, that's about 1 billion people using crypto. Then if we have another cycle where it slows down a little bit, and then the cycle after that is where we get the tokenization of real world assets and everything's then on some sort of blockchain. Yeah. Cryptocurrency is then worth probably 100 trillion and 3 billion people are on different networks all around the world. They've got to be positioned for that. And if the UK are trying to be a front runner like they were in the euro dollar market, then something like that makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying it's exactly that, and they're probably not that forward looking to do it straight away, because it never happens. Normally when I have a thought like that, it does happen, but it doesn't happen weirdly it does happen. Yeah. But it doesn't happen exactly when I think it's going to. But I would like to see something like that. It would be great. Even if it's, but India basically did the same thing. They kind of introduced like a straight up tax on all crypto of like 30%, but even on all transactions. So that kind of kills the idea of crypto, but it did give people like some standing of where they were with it. hopefully the UK are going to be more lenient than that, because otherwise I think I ain't going back.
That's what I mean. But it's a competition though. Whoever, like, people aren't afraid to move, especially people our age now. They're not afraid to move to different parts of the world if it benefits them financially. Like, obviously we've moved to Dubai for that very reason. Like, they do have that in mind. I don't think they're not thinking about that. They've got stats on how much of their population within a certain age group are moving to different jurisdictions across the world to benefit from tax or just benefit from regulations when it comes to crypto or just anything really in general. So they know that this is going on. Ultimately, like I said, it's a competition. They don't want to shoot themselves in the foot by over-regulating a space which is up and coming. Like, there's no denying it now, especially we're seeing all this institutional involvement. They know this. They know what's going on. So hopefully they'll be fairly lenient when it comes to regulation. Obviously, UK being UK, they're obviously going to try and line their pockets and do it to a certain extent, tax it. Obviously, they need to do that. It makes sense to do that, but we'll have to wait and see to see what happens, because you don't know what these guys are thinking sometimes.
No, you don't have a clue, and like as soon as you start to think you know, then you probably are on the real wrong course, because ultimately, as sad as it is to say, like, they do it to line their own pockets first,
Of course,
and then we're always in the rearview mirror. But they've got to do it in a way that's not going to piss everyone off as well.
Yeah, but there's a fine line between pissing people off and lining their pockets. But I know what comes to their priority will be lining their pockets. Right, so now CBDCs.
Indeed.
Controversial topic, and if I'm honest with you, it's something I don't actually know too much about. So I'm going to be quizzing you about it.
Okay.
Hopefully you can shed some light to these beautiful viewers about CBDCs, what they are, the advantages, the disadvantages, what people are worried about, because I know people are very worried about CBDCs. What is a CBDC? Central Bank Digital Currency. That's all I know. That's all I can provide to this conversation.
It's essentially what's looking like the next step in digital money.
Right.
Issued by the central bank of a country, just as we'll use the pound for example, just as the pound is issued right now from the Bank of England. Just a digital version.
So the government controls it then?
The government controls it and issues it, and they would obviously put that out to their retail-facing banks.
I can see why people don't like it, because it's centralised.
Yeah.
By the same people who control us now.
Well, that's the pro and con of it, basically. Like, a lot of arguments with people around the world or financial experts in general are that, and I actually agree with these arguments, that we do need a central entity to manage monetary policy in general. The retail investor or the person in the everyday public doesn't understand how the financial system works, how they're ever going to manage their own personal finances, or that for the good of the country. Like, whether there's corruption or whatever around it, conspiracy-wise, if you think about the actual infrastructure of how a financial system is run, we've, as a civilization, come to a point where we've created a government and we've created like a ruling body to manage things like our financial system for a reason.
Yeah.
That's helped society get to where it is today. Whether it's right the way we do it now within democracy or communism or however different people decide to do it, we have all kind of come together to decide that you need an entity that's going to manage the financial system. The digital pound, if we use a specific example, isn't going to be too dissimilar in terms of transactional value to cash, or like, we don't often use cash, but like the numbers on your NatWest account, Lloyd's account, and how you transfer value in that way. But on an actual base layer, they're very, very different.
Okay. So let's start off with, should we get the negatives out of the way first?
Yeah, okay, can you mention negatives?
Why are people so skeptical about CBDCs?
Because it eliminates every aspect of privacy, to start with, because it's all immutable and on the blockchain, and they can also program your money. These are two really big double aspects of negative. One is they can see everything that you do, because like if you eliminate cash, then like if I give you cash, the bank wouldn't know about that, but we wouldn't be able to do that. Well, cash won't go straight away, but that was the end goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So whatever I transfer to you, like, there's always going to be a record of that.
Yeah.
That's one thing. The other thing is, because of that, and because of what's happening in China at the minute with, they've got like a social credit score.
Yeah, this is what I want to talk about.
So this isn't necessarily going to be the same in the West as it is in the East, but a lot of people draw that comparison because China are the first ones like bringing this out. But the privacy aspect then coupled with the fact they can program your money, meaning that they can literally directly shut it off from you, change the amount of money in your account, like all these sorts of things, because it's programmable, that's where people have that secondary issue. And if you then couple that with a bad regime, so it's not actually a CBDC in itself that's bad, it's potentially the rulers that are bad, because they would have complete access to everyone's monetary, like everyone's sovereign wealth, essentially.
But unfortunately, we've got a lot of those bad rulers around at the moment. So so say if you do something bad in China right now, they would just automatically deduct that money from your bank account. If there was a CBDC in place right now, and you did something bad, like you got a speeding ticket or something, it's just bam, straight out your account without any appeal or anything.
It's actually a really good example. If you make that same speeding ticket example, one of the things that's going to probably come in is digital identity, which makes so much sense anyway, because who needs to be carrying a passport around with them all the time?
No one.
So digital identity makes sense. So then that'll be probably tied to your bank account, just as like your normal identity is anyway. You have to upload your passport, your driver's license, whatever, whenever you open a new account. It's already tied, it's just not digital yet.
Yeah.
So then with the same speeding ticket example, you'll be driving along the road, speeding, boom, you get caught speeding, instantly decredited from your account. If you get maybe like 4 or 5 of these speeding tickets, or in the UK, like you get points, don't you? If you get like 4 lots of 3 points, which is 12, then you get your license banned. You might have a deduction in social credit score. If you get a certain social credit score that goes below a certain threshold, you can't do things like eat in certain restaurants, go to the public, on the tube or whatever in London, buy like certain foods at the shop, buy alcohol, do these sorts of things. And that's where people are really getting this like, it's almost Black Mirror-y sort of concept in their head, which we do or don't, we don't have a clue whether that's going to happen or not. Like there's a definite possibility that that's possible. However, what I do want to reiterate is, although that it does, like from where we were sitting in the financial system, we could argue there is some sort of underlying corruption, especially around people making a profit. We do, on paper, live in a democracy, so it isn't. They can't just introduce a social credit score on people, because at some point people in the West are going to be like, this is too much, and I'm going to revolt.
Exactly.
It's not. We don't live in China. It's not like. We don't live and use the exact same policies, so although I can understand why people are worried about that, at the same time, you can't just presume that we're going to take on the same steps as them. And it isn't the currency itself that's the issue, it's the people controlling the currency.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to get to a point where they'll be able to dictate what we do in terms of like the social aspects. I don't think that will ever be to the extent of like Black Mirror, let's say, where you're blocked for going into this restaurant because you've been acting negatively or something like that. I just think the main goal of the Central Bank Digital Currency is so that they can control all the money and they can see everything that's happening, so they can tax people more efficiently, so people aren't buying drugs, for example, or funding like illicit activities, you know what I mean? I think that's what they want to do. That's just from my stance, from my basic understanding of what a CBDC is and my perspective of what I think the government's aim is trying to do. Like you said, in China, I think in those kind of regions, the social aspect might come into play a bit more, where they will literally try and control how you live, which is just a horrible thought. But like you said, in the UK, that wouldn't happen because people would literally just revolt and start rioting in the streets if it came down to that, because no one wants that.
I mean, that happened in Nigeria. It's already happened.
Is it?
They introduced like I don't want to guess at the Nigerian currency because I can't remember it.
Yeah.
But then as a CBDC, and then people rioted in the streets. They started trading like literal goods for goods trading again.
Really?
And then they started rioting in the streets and they took it away.
That's what I'd assume that would happen in the UK, but I guess that's the main disadvantage. Are there any other disadvantages that you can think of?
Yeah, just as I said, like programmable money. Like, so that means that, like, you were talking about taxes specifically. I think there's a pro and a con to that, because the pro is you wouldn't have to worry about like filing your taxes, and that's probably automatically worked out by an AI and happening.
Yeah.
But then also, if they introduce some sort of financial policy, it means that you have to follow it. Like, you have to, for example, if they say like, oh, we've got negative interest rates, then you have negative interest rates. Like, you can't do anything about that specifically. Yeah. So that's where as a con, it's like almost, because it's programmable, it forces you to do whatever it is, but you kind of have to do that anyway. So the biggest cons, are definitely privacy, and then coupled with potentially bad ruling and social credit, those sorts of things. That's where the biggest worries come from.
Do you think they'll be able to control, like obviously right now we've got like monetary policy, all this kind of stuff, wouldn't that all be automatic then under a CBDC? Because couldn't they direct capital to certain areas of their economy, if that makes sense?
Definitely, and this is one of the things that I think is the biggest pro to CBDC.
Yeah,
when there's any sort of weakness in the economy, you can direct liquidity specifically to that area of weakness. That would stop overflow liquidity. So let's use C-19 or a pandemic for an example.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people who may not be able to go to work, couldn't pay their bills, all these sorts of things. If we use specifically energy for an example, because the CBDC is programmable, they could program into your account a certain amount of energy tokens that if they were not spent within the month on an energy bill, they would just disappear at the end of the month. So that's where they would be really positive, because you could directly stimulate to help people with energy costs, but without over-stimulating like we had in C-19. A lot of people taking the piss out of the system, basically taking furlough, working a job, doing this, boom, 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 and just basically bringing in loads of extra cash when they probably didn't really need it. Whereas you then have the struggling family, single mother, as a potential example, can't afford their energy bills, isn't getting enough stimulus, but you have some people who may be self-employed, taking the furlough and still working for cash, for example.
That's a big advantage actually, isn't it?
Yeah, huge advantage.
What else can we think of there on top of our head?
What for advantages?
Yeah, advantages.
Instant payments and settlements.
Yeah.
So now, like, we pay and settle, but on our front-end apps, it looks like it happens, but it doesn't actually happen straight away. You would be able to, as we talked about earlier, have like literally for business within a country or internationally, there's a lot of positives to it, because you could have like your invoice, and your invoice could quote a specific amount on the invoice. You could both digitally agree on that amount. It could instantly settle like your payment to them and their credit and your debit like instantly. And you could also then have like a financial option, like a finance option, where like it might escrow a certain amount of money that if you had a job, for example, let's say you earned 30,000 a year, it could see that you were eligible to make those financial repayments. You could agree that online every month, boom, a certain amount would come automatically out of that account. So like a direct debit on steroids, essentially. So there's another way that it could be used. Basically, lending and borrowing would be instant. We also don't know how that might affect money in general, because one of the biggest like pros to money is the velocity that it can move around, because the way that an economy works in general is basically you just give your money to someone else, you give it to someone else, you give it to someone else, you give it to someone else. Like you earn your money, you go to the shop, you give it to the shop owner, he takes that, he pays for his bill, they take the money from the bill and they might invest in a company. Like that's where the money goes along the chain. And if that's instant, like boom, 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 we don't really know what positives that could bring, but it basically, the velocity of money is always a big focus point when looking at any sort of monetary policy.
It's like the flow of money is just going to be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, it's going to be instant and transparent.
So I guess that's a good thing. Even because it'll make like us, our lives a bit easier when it comes to certain things. Even when we relate it back to taxes, like it's an absolute nightmare to do taxes. Some people see it as like such a daunting task. Obviously,
I do. I hate it.
I hate it as well, and like they get their accountants to do it.
Yeah.
But now it'll be everything's on the chain, so like there's no hiding from anything. At the same time, it does make your life easier, because everything's a lot, from what you just described to me, everything's a lot more efficient. But so the flow of money is all good, but it's just a control aspect. That's what it is.
And another big positive to it could be, let's just use an example of like a student. They might be offered higher interest rates than someone who's earning a higher salary. So they might say, look, you're a student, we want to incentivize you to save some money. We'll give you 10% on your cash. Whereas the person next door to you might be a successful business person, they've got a lot of cash, we'll give you 4% because we want you to start circulating that cash around the system a little bit more. So it's programmable for demographic, age, anything. It can be, because of like our advances probably within AI, we'll be able to program it specifically for each person.
It sounds pretty good to me, to be fair. I mean, look, it massively depends on how it's implemented. There's a lot that could potentially go wrong with it, but if implemented in the correct way, where it respects the end user and it respects our privacy to a certain extent and our rights to a certain extent, I feel like it could be net positive.
It It will be net positive so long as, like you're saying, that we can trust the government.
That's all it comes down to.
I, just as much as you, have distrust in the government, and we've been brought up in an era where we as a generation have been pretty let down by our higher ups, so we have no reason to be trusting the government specifically. Like, whatever your political views are, that's up to you, but that's our biggest negative towards CBDCs. The technology itself is positive.
Yeah, and let's move on to, should we bring XRP into it now? Because obviously blockchain companies, projects, crypto, they're all kind of positioning themselves. Some of them obviously supplement the use of CBDC technology, and one of them is obviously XRP, for the fact that obviously, like we were discussing just before now, instant settlement of payments.
It's rumoured not rumoured, James Wallace, who's head of CBDC, said that they were at some stage, whether that was conversation, piloting or rolling out, of working with 20% of the world's central banks for central bank digital currencies.
Ripple are working with 20% of central digital currency banks in the world.
Central banks in the world to create CBDC at some stage of creating a CBDC.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen their partnerships with Palau already about that already. So Bhutan as well.
Hong Kong, I think Lithuania maybe one. There's one other I can't. It always escapes from. Oh, Colombia.
Okay, so how would Ripple directly affect or contribute towards a central bank adopting CBDC technology?
Well, they literally build the rail that central banks run on.
Okay.
So the CBDC would run on RippleNet or indirectly the XRP ledger. Within that, because countries are scared of this sort of thing, and the way that David Schwartz describes it is there would be a walled garden, meaning that they have their own specific ledger with their own specific currency on like a private ledger section of the XRP ledger. But then this is where the lovely thing about XRP is, if you want to communicate with the walled garden next to you, you need a way to get over that wall.
Bridge.
And then exactly, a bridge is the exact description. An XRP is a neutral bridge asset that would allow the £E to change into the Hong Kong dollar through XRP as like an exchange asset or a neutral bridge asset, or I think in the recent UK description it's called a utility token.
Okay, so like I said, they've been publicly announced that they've been working with Bhutan and Palau. Let's speculate a bit. Obviously, like we mentioned in that first section of the podcast, Brad's been in the same room as Rishi Sunak. Like the UK, they've got strong ties, like we've mentioned in previous episodes, loads of tweets, loads of threads on it as well. What's the likelihood of Ripple partnering with like the Central Bank of England, for example, to create their CBDC?
Quite high.
And what effect would that have on the price of XRP? Like, how significant is that to partner with like such a significant economy?
It's massive in terms of speculation, because everyone's going to start piling into XRP as soon as they hear about that, especially people in the UK and this sort of thing. If the UK sort out their crypto legislation as well, it's going to be massive. It won't be all of the money going straight into XRP from the UK financial system straight away. They'll probably roll out sort of a wholesale CBDC first, which will probably just do international transfers, so maybe like central bank to central bank transfers on large accounts, these sorts of things. And that's where we would see an initial pump in XRP, not really taking into consideration the utility, more people just speculating on what the utility might be. And I think a slow, gradual grind over time would bring the base value of XRP, or the low, it'd be like higher lows all the way, basically, until more and more utility came in. That's one side of the coin, pardon the pun. The other side of it is, potentially everything happens all at once. If you have a network, to be able to communicate with another person on that network, you're going to have their walled garden is going to have to also be live. So maybe the Bank of England goes live at the same time that the Hong Kong dollar goes live at the same time. We've got Bhutan, we've got some that are already live, but it's like plugging into a network, and then boom, you've got all those extra corridors is the best way to describe it. Like ODL corridors is what I tried to describe to you once a long time ago, which is like where it's like Metcalfe's law or Reed's law. If you've got a network and that then creates like a sub-network on top of that, every single sub-network you plug into that network makes the network grow exponentially, because you're not times in like, 1 by 3, you times in 3 by whatever's in that network, which might be 6, so 3 by 6 by 12 by 15 by, that's how they grow like massively. That's how networks can grow so big. And that's basically what David Schwartz said is, if you imagine that XRP is like the Twitter of the iPhone, but the iPhone's not out yet, and the iPhone description was a CBDC, so the CBDC is not out yet, but the XRP solution to a CBDC is already there and ready.
And Schwartz is cracked as well. You already know he's miles ahead of it. But, anything else we can speak about?
Anything else towards CBDCs? No, just the fact that like 97% of the world's central banks are at some point of testing CBDCs. Yes, 20% with Ripple, but 97% are at some point of testing. So inevitably they're coming, whether people say they are or they're not. We've seen Christine Lagarde say, oh, we're moving forward with the next stage of the CBDC pilot, yet we're not sure whether it's going to come out, and the next stage starts in November. A lot of people are speculating there could be some relationship with XRP there, with the introduction of ISO in November as well. Whether there is or if there's not, I don't know. I'm not guessing or guesstimating on that with my price action and speculation around XRP, but at some point I think it's going to happen, and at some point some amount of XRP or XRPL based CBDCs will probably be launched. Whether you believe that or not, it's up to you, and whether you want to speculate on that or not, that's up to you. But CBDCs are coming. If you can stand there and shake your fist at them all you want, but they're already here in China, and they're probably coming to the West very soon. So position yourself and understand what's going on. Like,
that's it.
There's a rule with the European Central Bank, you might not be able to hold more than like 3,000 or 1,000 euros of cash, and everyone's like fuming about that. But if you think that assets in general are going to be tokenized, you won't need to hold that much cash. This is why you need to make yourself financially literate. You might want to hold 1,000 euros of gold. You might have an investment into a tokenized house. You might own 15% of the next door neighbor's house. You might own a car. You might own cryptocurrency. But if everything's instantly liquid and you can move value in real time, which is basically what XRP is, one of the primary use cases, got an inbuilt DEX on the XRP ledger, which is a decentralized exchange. You can move this value from the house into gold, into the euro, boom, 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 all the time, like finding instant liquidity. Why do you need to hold that much cash? You literally don't, because it would be detrimental, because it's not going to earn you any sort of yield, and it's not going to perform better than itself. It's not going to perform better than cash. So that's why you might hold other assets and in that world. So that's
scary. There's a lot of change coming.
A lot of change coming, and I think it's going to create a bigger difference between the rich and the poor, because the rich are going to understand how to utilize it, and the poor won't.
Yeah, is what it is really. Like you said, position yourself correctly.
Now's the time to learn.
Instead of fighting against it, just accept the fact that it's coming and try and position yourself correctly and maybe profit from it as well by investing in, I don't know, not specifically XRP, or just things that might facilitate the use of that kind of technology. Yeah,
like digital wallets.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be some sort of user interface system it's going to run on. A company will probably create that.
Yeah.
We like XRP, it's a digital asset. Like Stellar does something similar. HBAR potentially does something similar. XDC. I can't think of any more. Algorand potentially. All these things off the top of my head that may or may not affect it. But you've also then got to think about digital stores of value, potentially Bitcoin. Like that, it's going to be more accessible to be bought and sold if you've got a central bank digital currency, because it's already run on the blockchain. Access to Ethereum. These sorts of things are all going to potentially become much bigger than they are now, because it's going to be a lot easier to get involved with those different assets, digital assets.
Yep. Like I said, a lot of change coming, but get yourself clued up on it, because it's coming probably sooner than you think as well. A lot of these kind of countries, like Christian Lagarde, like you said earlier, are moving towards this behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. A lot's going on behind closed doors, which even we don't know. We only get little clues about.
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the first stage of the e-pound next year, or end of this year into start of next year, like maybe Q1, Q2 of 2024.
And there's linking that back to like the UK regulation of crypto. Do you think that's why they're speeding up the process of regulating crypto?
Yeah.
Because potentially we've got a CBDC coming.
Yeah, and if BlackRock get this Bitcoin ETF out, everyone's going to be looking at crypto in general. The eyes are going to be on it. It's not just the money that goes into the Bitcoin ETF. We spoke about this before. Yeah. It's not just the money that goes like directly into that. It's the hype and the validation that the space gets in general from that, and the UK want to be ahead with it. Oh, we've got the E-pound, look at us, we've got regulation in place, BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in the world, building this new space, so we can have a look.
Yeah, cool. Anything else you want to cover on that? I think
that's everything.
That's everything, really. All right, well, cool. We're going to wrap this episode up there. I hope you guys learned something. It was a bit informative today about CBDCs. I hope you learned something and do some research into it, because it's something you need to be aware of. But yeah, I think that's a wrap for this week. And we'll catch you guys later.
Peace up, hey, down, as I should say.